special transmission on the budget today. I'm Maqbool and you're watching PTV World. In today's transmission, we will be, of course, taking a look at the government's budget announcement that was earlier made by the Finance Minister, with, of course, targets being laid out with regards to what the financial position of Pakistan is looking like over the past year, and, of course, moving forward, what it will be in the fiscal year 2026. And this is, of course, important to note, given, of course, Pakistan's positive trajectory that we've seen in the past, and of course Pakistan's involvement with the IMF and its bailout package. And we've seen that a number of measures have been taken to introduce reforms and changes that would add to particular sectors, and of course in terms of tax collections as well, and the complete ways in which Pakistan intends to move forward with plans to drive 4.2% growth in the next fiscal year. And this is something, of course, that has been taken while slashing spending, and then, of course, moving forward with tax reforms as well. We also know that the outlay of the budget is also very, very important. What we've seen previously also happen with regards to the kind of changes that we see from the past year is a 6.9% decrease of last year's budget. And this is, of course, very, very important in terms of what will be the way that we're actually looking at the picture, with also the current expenditure to be 5.33% decrease from the previous year. And this is important also in terms of the way that it's going to impact our sectors and the decisions that are to be taken. We've also had a very high target in terms of tax collection as well, with the Finance Minister talking about different reforms and measures taken in order to improve tax collection, and how it was something that was also recognized by the IMF that more taxes were collected because of law enforcement measures that were taken in the past as well, with more so taking now in the next fiscal year as well. And there's also, of course, developments with regards to different reliefs that have been granted to the salaried class in terms of tax slabs, and we also see a reduction of the super tax in the corporate sector, and of course relief in the agriculture sector as well, where pesticides or fertilizers have not been taxed. There is, of course, a lot of concern in terms of what that would mean for the public at large, and then, of course, for the business community, and what sort of measures will be needed as we move forward, again with important payments such as, of course, the interest payments on our debts that again have a very high percentage of the expenditure that is projected. So we're going to be taking a look at all of this in the transmission day. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal, and we've also been joined online by senior economist Dr. Vaqar Ahmad. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the show today, and of course to taking the time out to speak to us about the budget. And Dr. Vaqar, if you can hear me, I'm going to start with you with reference to the overall picture, and in the ways that we are, of course, taking a look at what the budget really looks like. But I believe you haven't joined us yet, so I'm going to go to you, Farrukh, in terms of what you make of the current budget, and in the ways that, of course, just yesterday we were talking about what is expected in the larger sense, or more holistic review of the budget. What do you make of it?
Right, Sana, one thing is for sure, when you talk about our budget, it shows that the macroeconomic stabilization has been achieved. So that crisis of balance of payments that we used to have has actually reduced, and it is under control. The outlay is over somewhere around over 21 trillion rupees. And when you talk about revenue collection, it is 15.3 trillion, which includes 12.9 trillion worth of tax collection per projection. So it is a good a little bit of ambitious, target. But one thing is for sure, that while the government actually wants the economy to grow, but remember, a few months ago there was an important economic summit or conference in which we saw IMF representative actually saying that Pakistan needs to be conservative. I told you about that at that time also, because Pakistan has this structural problem of boom and bust cycle. What happens is that when you become a little bit confident, you start opening up the economy. What happens immediately is that while the economy grows, your imports increase, and the foreign capital, the foreign the currency actually flees the country, and then once again the country has balance of payment issue. So, keeping that in mind and then looking at PSDP number is good because it is 1.5 trillion only. It is not huge or bloated as one would have expected. And ADP, the provincial share, in addition to this, is over 2 trillion. So all these things put together, one realizes what the government is trying to do. The government's main target is to increase exports, so that through exports the economy can stand on its feet and our business sector can also develop. When more factories are established, you get more employment, more people actually get jobs, and the economy actually grows. But the most important thing is to actually find alternatives to imports and the way imports actually become a drain on the economy. So there is some relief for the salaried class when it comes to, as you pointed out, in tax collection also and also in salaries. But we still have to see how that shakes down, because every year you and I actually keep on hearing about that, and even when the government actually includes contract employees in the fine print, our finance guys tell us that you are not included, so you can stay put. So the day I hear something positive about that, I'm going to celebrate, but for right now, it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. But I hope that there are people who are celebrating. We've also been joined in the transmission by senior economist Dr. Vaqar Ahmad. Thank you very much, Dr. Vaqar, for being a part of the show. Your perspective first on what you think about the budget.
Yes, thank you very much. I thought that under the constraints, it was a very balanced budget. We are under a fund program, and our priority should be to keep the fund program on track at all costs, given that keeping it on track brings a lot of confidence to our lenders, to our investors, and I think the government has done a good job on most accounts. I also felt that while space was limited to be innovative on the tax fund or the expenditure fund, I would certainly have liked to see a more ambitious effort on the structural reforms part. I thought that we could have been more innovative in case of energy, in case of state-owned enterprises, in case of privatization, where we haven't taken a strong position, at least not in the budget speech. Thirdly, I felt that there was something to cheer about for the low-income group, for the business persons who operate under the SME sector, for those who are, of course, aspirants for low-cost housing, for those who are looking for the revival of construction sector and its allied industries. For them, of course, there is something to cheer about.
Absolutely. And Dr. Vaqar, with reference to what we've seen in terms of certain measures that have been taken regarding tax collection targets and measures to reform that particular sector, what about that?
Yes. So I think on the taxation front, while of course the regime has been tightened further in case of the non-filers, there has been a very decent reform of trade taxes. You have seen that the government is now committing to reducing the customs duties, the additional duties, within a 4-year phased period. We also see that the government has resisted any sort of increase in indirect taxes or withholding taxes that burdens the poor. One thing that I would have liked them to do away with was the draconian power of freezing the bank accounts or the records of our business community. That really doesn't go well, not just with the local business community, but also the foreigners who want to invest in Pakistan. So what the law, if it's passed, will now say is that, yes, you have the right to appeal within 30 days, but within those 30 days, FBR can confiscate. I felt that this draconian clause should have been done away with.
Dr. Saab, with your permission, Sana. Dr. Saab, can we say that with these measures regarding tax collection on all, the government seems to be actually choosing stick over carrots?
Absolutely. I think this is what the approach is. It does work until an extent. We have seen, of course, very stringent measures in the past as well. But of course, whether they can be implemented, that requires the test of time. Of course, things will also go in the anomalies committee during the next week or so. And I think that this will again come under discussion because this was something which the entire business community and all Pakistan chambers of commerce meeting which took place had also suggested that such measures have to really be done away with.
Dr. Waqar, there is obviously another interesting point which has turned up now. Looking at the trajectory in recent years, especially post-COVID era and during COVID as well, there is a sense of getting on e-commerce more and more, and that is what we have been seeing, that there are many applications on of course phones and many websites as well that have been earning millions of dollars from Pakistan. They are based outside of the country and people were actually buying from them. Now of course government is increasing the tax on it, even if somebody is delivering it on the door, and at the time of payments, if they are making a payment with the card, of course it goes straight away, the tax would be collected by the bank, and if it is being paid by cash, then the company would be liable. The company which is actually delivering the items, they will be of course paying their tax. Do you think that this increase in tax from 1% to 2% should have been increased more, so that the local products, they can be of course getting a sort of a fair trade deal out of it, rather than going online to buy stuff, they can simply go to the market and they can find the same things at the same kind of price, so that they can end up buying it from the market?
Yes, absolutely. So I think this provision, which was almost tax-free, it acted as a disincentive for our local off-the-shelf retailer. And I spent the large part of budget speech presentation at the Rawalpindi Chamber of Commerce, where most of the traders essentially appreciated the taxation of COD, cash on delivery transactions. Having said this, I think the implementation won't be as simple, because I think, as all of us know, there's a large gray part of this trading activity which doesn't take place through any website or web portals. It is essentially taking place through WhatsApp groups. And therein, I think there is larger sort of a capacity which is required. Already, if you look at two of the provincial governments, they were taxing such transactions, given that e-commerce comes under the services sector. So provinces were allowed to tax. Two of the provinces have been doing this, but they haven't been sort of successful 100%. And even in case of federal, they will have to be there has to be really capacity uplift, use of forensic audit, use of AI in order to detect how does the exchange through COD takes place, because even now a large part of this is really not through websites.
Right. And Dr. Waqar, when we take a look also with reference to various sectors and the budget allocations for them as well, it's important, of course, in terms of what goes in the education sector, what goes on in the health sector, and then, of course, what goes on in the defense sector and other areas. And so I want your take on the overall allocations that have been made. We know that there's been about a 20% increase in the defense sector. We know that previously both the health and education sectors have lacked budget allocations. And so what do you make of what is going to be happening in the next fiscal year in this regard?
And Dr. Waqar, if you can add another question that is related to research and development, especially research and development related to our industrial sector that is involved in the exports of Pakistan. can we say that we have allocated enough for research and development, especially for the industrial sector, so that we can improve our exports?
Yes. So thank you very much. I think starting from the last one, the answer is certainly no. We can, of course, do better, but the fiscal space currently doesn't allow that to happen. The competitiveness of our exporting industry, our agriculture, has been on a decline, and R&D is the answer. But the fact that we are unable to find that fiscal space to allocate more for R&D remains a challenge. One segment of R&D, which is, of course, higher education, they have seen an increase in their allocation, but most of that allocation, if I may say, is to complete the existing portfolio of programs and projects, and very less for the new AI-related or knowledge economy-related projects. Most of it is to complete what has already been started. So certainly on the R&D front, we need to do more if we have to compete in STEM-related areas. On the defense budget, of course, given the political economy in which Pakistan was operating, it was a no-brainer. Of course, stakeholders, all of them would have liked to see defense budget increased so that greater capabilities can be enhanced for national security. In terms of other areas that come under the federal budget, in case of health and education, federal government always has a limited role, given that it is only responsible for jurisdiction of ICT and hospitals and schools under ICT. So again, the principle has been to complete the ongoing projects and not to go for look good or sound good announcements, which of course IMF would also not allow that. But where I think you have seen a big push investment being announced is firstly transportation sector. The focus of the PMLN government remains on building and rehabilitation of the road sector. So there's a big push announcement for large allocation for Karachi-Chaman highway, Sindh, Hyderabad, as well as north-south connectivity. These are all good signs which contribute to Pakistan's longer-term logistics sector's improvement. Then we also see that in case of water resource development, the allocation has been protected for ongoing investments in large dams as well as reservoirs. Again, with, of course, your neighbor getting hostile with the kind of announcements we have heard about stopping Pakistan's water, I think we need to be mindful about protecting our own investments in the water sector and bringing greater efficiency over there. So this has been a reflection in this year's budget as well. My final point on this question would be really about the efficiency with which we need to spend these resources. Last year, you have already noticed that we were unable to spend the public sector development program in a timely manner. So this time around, we have to be very efficient with the investment which has been public investment which has been allowed by the IMF.
Right. Dr. Saab, I think you're absolutely right regarding the reservoir issue. I think that is inspired work, because yesterday when the finance minister was talking about climate change, that was a big question that came to mind. What if India does not release water or inundates us with water? But I want to go back to what you said earlier regarding R&D, and that is a very fair point. But the question at this moment is, whose responsibility actually is R&D? Is it not essentially part of the private sector? Usually all over the world it is private sector which is the engine of R&D. It seems in Pakistan everything has to come from government of Pakistan and then things can take off. The second question is regarding the pinch that the working class might actually feel. Of course, there is in lower slabs there has been some concession regarding taxes, but when you look at other exemptions like 650cc cars, those exemptions have been withdrawn. So do you think that there is going to be some pinch for the working class or middle class as well?
Yes. So, Farrukh, the pinch factor, of course, still remains. Unfortunately, despite of the macroeconomic stability which has been achieved, there's very limited room that can be sort of transferred to the working class. You have seen that while Pakistan has achieved a reduction in the price inflation rate, still the next year's inflation rate is projected slightly higher, given that government is anticipating risks to this stability as well. Additionally, in case there are any external disturbances, including war-like situations, one could still see the pressure on the rupee, which could again translate into sort of keeping a pressure on the purchasing power of the poorest. Again, on the relief side, the kind of relief that working class was anticipating, for example, the increase in public sector employees uh, uh, pays, for example, you have seen that the pays have increased by 10%, but the Clerks Association was up in arms because they were expecting much higher increase. So I think the relief part will have to be really gradual, and that's only when stability, the economic stability translates into economic growth, and that growth part remains sustained over a certain number of years, and that's when that relief becomes sustainable. Otherwise, everything is under the umbrella of ad hoc relief, and one part of ad hoc relief you have seen is the increase in the BISP allocation. So government has tried to create a room for increasing the expenditure for basic income support program, including increasing the families under the program as well. On the R&D part, I totally agree with you. Government shouldn't be the only one to be blamed for investing in R&D. But the thing with R&D is that it has become really capital intensive now. So the mantra traditionally used to be, of course, buy, borrow, and steal. Now the steal part, of course, is unethical. But in case of buy and borrow, if you don't have space to buy, there are countries which are willing to lend you the technology, but you need to have a very organized house to receive it. So China is one example. You have seen it in the defense cooperation, for example. They are willing to, of course, come through with the JVs and SEZs, technology parks as well, the Special Technology Zone Authority. But you see, there has to be policy certainty if you have to even borrow the R&D framework as well. And there has to be sector-specific effort, and this is where I think your point is extremely important. If, if, for example, in the meat industry, in the livestock industry, in the apparel industry, if there has to be B2B matching to receive the R&D, let's say from China or Turkey or Malaysia, for example, are my sectoral associations prepared or not? Most of them are not. So your point is well taken.
Dr. Vaqar, there's also, of course, mention by the finance minister regarding the reduction of prices of electricity and of course, the privatization of distribution companies in order to help the energy and power sector, and of course, large-scale projects. He mentioned Recodic being a game changer and the feasibility being completed in January. But I want your take in terms of how is it that we're going to move forward with overall reforms and improvement in the energy sector. While these steps are, of course, welcome, we've seen the projects still being delayed. We've seen that the reduction in the prices does not also counter for other elements that are causing problems in terms of energy for not just the consumers but the business community as well. So how does the government plan to reform or add value in this sector?
Yes. So I think you're spot on when you say that these plans aren't new in the energy sector. And this is how business community has also responded to the announcements under the plan for addressing circular debt. And eventually, any industrial sector competitiveness would depend on addressing Pakistan's energy challenge first and foremost. Now, if you pick up last year's budget speech, you would find almost a very similar promise in case of electricity, gas, fuel sector, as well as addressing of the circular debt. It also talks about privatizing GENCOs and DISCOs in a very similar fashion, like we have heard in this year's budget speech. So essentially, this is what I was referring to, that clearly in a coalition, I won't like to say that it's a weak coalition. It hasn't demonstrated any signs of weakness, but it is still a coalition government. It occurs to me that probably government is still not committing to reforms which require a stronger political will, which require a will to go after, shut down, divest those state-owned enterprises, including generation companies and distribution companies which are loss-making. And this is why there's any plan to address the circular debt gets stalled.
Absolutely. There's also, of course, concern when we talk about the ways in which other sectors and part of the business community is going to be incentivized. There is mention of the IT sector, and with regards to cybersecurity also, of course, played a very important role recently as well. And then in the ways that the finance minister pointed out, how the sector in itself, Pakistan is going up with regards to the involvement and the talent that exists. But in terms of actually incentivizing that and providing that relief to the public and those who want to be part of the sector, do you think the measures are enough?
And Dr. Vaqar, especially when we talk about IT related exports and content related exports as well, we know Pakistani youth is actually earning millions of dollars every month in this sector as well, by their content which they are obviously sharing on different mediums, social mediums, and by, of course, extending their services to different companies based in throughout the world. In this whole scenario, should we be taxing them more, because eventually that money is sort of adding up into our overseas remittances?
Yeah. So I think on the tax part, there's very limited that federal government can do on those operating in IT services area, because this comes under the provincial tax domain, and provinces are already benefiting from the revenues which are being sort of charged from organized companies in the IT services sector, as well as freelancers or individuals in the IT services sector. In the IT hardware sector, of course, federal government has its domain, but then our contribution to the hardware part is significantly low. Having said this, I think your point is well noted. IT sector has contributed very significantly this year, but a large part of their income constitutes exports. So government has taken a very principled stance that IT sector contributed over $3 billion of export earnings this year. So given that the principal stance says that anybody who contributes to exports and foreign exchange reserves will be taxed in a much more lenient manner, which actually means the full and final liability is much less on the exporters. May they be in the commodity producing sectors or may they be in IT sector. By that principle, of course, our freelancers, those who operate in the IT services sector, end up paying a reduced amount of liability. Having said this, their demand domestically is taxed in a very similar manner, the way any other corporate entity would be paying a corporate tax. It's only on the export income that they get to have a reduced tax liability. So the final point on this IT incomes would be that we should sort of stop that temptation to go after a sector which is just picking up. You know, we have just given incentives under the Special Technology Zone Authorities Act. It's just been 2.5 years. We have again sort of amended the IT regime so many times in the last 5 years. Herein, you have a sector where youth employment is sort of a great opportunity. You have a demographic dividend. And I think Pakistan cannot afford a kind of policy stop-go cycles where the youth or the startups, if I can call them, they get discouraged.
Right. With your permission, Sana, I wanted to correct something that I said at the start.
Right.
I ended up rounding up the outlay number to 20 trillion. It is quite visible on your screen, 17.5 trillion. But Dr. Saab, I had two questions. One is regarding SOEs. Because there seems to be a huge bone of contention in this country. Sometimes we want to go to Khazana model, now we want to divest as much as possible. Do you think that the government's current strategy is working in this aspect? This is first question. First you answer that, then I'm going to ask for the follow-up.
Yes. So I think, Farrukh Sahab, I think finance ministry is in a catch-22 situation where IMF is really growing out of patience. You have a SOE plan which is not being implemented at a pace at which IMF would like to see, at least the reform of those select entities which have been put on the website. But then, as I said, you are operating under a coalition government, wherein, of course, PMLN ends up asking the coalition partners, most notably the People's Party, which has a very different vision of state-owned enterprises. And of course, they have expressed this vision time and time again. They would like to remain in the same public sector paradigm and try to correct these enterprises. Now, the two visions cannot really go together. And this has been discussed so many times that there has to be an overarching thinking led by the Prime Minister himself. And this, unless somebody really owns the SOE plan for a certain number of years, you can't commit to IMF and then get embarrassed every year. Even in today's budget speech, you noted that there was only one enterprise that finance minister named, and that was PIA. Apart from that, he said that some other Gencos and Discos, and didn't even name them specifically, which clearly shows that there isn't a consensus within the ruling regime at the moment regarding the SOEs.
Faisal, you wanted to ask something. Please go ahead.
I just wanted a comment from you, Dr. Vaqar, related to our, of course, expectations that we want to achieve the IT exports. We want to take them to $25 billion a year. Is it achievable?
I think for a population which is young, and for a population that is adding young working age people in the IT sector at a rate at which only one or two other countries are contributing, I think this target is very much achievable. Two things need to be done. One is to really reduce the regulatory burden faced by this sector. I still regard this sector as nascent, given that most of the enterprises which are working in this sector are less than 3 to 5 years of age, which is no age in any sector or enterprise. Second, I think you cannot have policy stop-go cycles in this circle because in the sector, because youth have the world to them, and it's very easy for them to really shift gears and change countries. Anybody who's trained in the IT sector has a global demand now. So we don't want to lose them very quickly. Retaining them is a key over here. So one thing is to keep the regulatory burden low. The second thing is to have a very certain payments regime. The fact that in the past 3 years, even the best freelancers in this country couldn't navigate a complex payment regime. Sometimes, of course, it had to be done due to FATF, but on other times, it was our own doing. On occasions, it was the capacity deficits of our own banking sector that overly regulated the payment system. So I think all of this is known to the finance ministry. The main thing is that if finance ministry and commerce ministry have to work together to achieve this $25 billion target, they have to move fast with the regulatory reform and payment reform in the IT sector.
Right. There's also a concern with regards to Dr. Vaqar, the ways in which we're going to factor in climate change. And this is, of course, something that was mentioned in terms of how foreign interventions are important in terms of mitigation. The climate fund by the IMF, of course, was also mentioned. But what if the government and in the ways that Pakistan in itself can actually spend on prevention measures, also mitigation measures that can help us within our own country?
Yes. So I think climate change, as much as it is a threat to the country, I see it as an opportunity to really put in place a new green production paradigm in the country. I think that public and private sector dialogue has been very productive in this space. Pakistan is going to receive a very decent amount of climate finance in the coming years. IMF has also approved a facility which will be financing our climate change needs. Uh, I think there are two or three things which we need to do in order to really help ourselves here. One is that large part of amount in the climate space which has to be spent has really to be spent by local governments. They are not there in place. We don't have strong local governments. In fact, in some provinces, we don't have any local governments. We have local administration. In this case, the provinces take over. So provinces really need to have a very good grasp of how the climate finance is lured in, how it is spent responsibly, so that you can get the more of it, given that it is also linked with disasters and disaster risk reduction. The second part is what Farrukh Saab was saying earlier, that a large part of what has to be done in the climate finance space is not government's responsibility. The government just needs to really lay down the kind of rules which can allow private sector to bring in climate finance. A lot of private sector is waiting to invest in green energy, in green waste management, so many other areas, green construction. But in order to do so, they would like to earn credits for it. They would like to earn carbon credits for it. You need to have those market rules so that we incentivize the private sector to shift to green. And while Ministry of Climate Change has taken measures, the provinces still need to get a grasp of what those measures are so that they can announce similar kind of facilities under their jurisdiction. Within the private sector, there are capacity constraints on climate finance. So while multinational corporations working inside Pakistan have a very good grasp, some of them have actually started carrying or trading their own carbon transactions. They don't do it in Pakistan, but still they would go clean in Pakistan and claim the credit outside of Pakistan where the regime exists. But we would essentially like to see this carbon trading regime being more institutionalized in Pakistan in future.
Right. Dr. Saab, very quick three questions actually. Earlier I said one follow-up, but there are three. One is regarding data. Yesterday, Finance Minister himself admitted that data is new oil and it is very important. We have seen that countries like India have not been that forthright with their data. How verifiable is our data right now? And what can be done to actually improve upon it? Secondly, adjacent to that, because data usually is also used for AI, training AI and using through AI, how cognizant is the government that in coming days, within years, the nature of global economy is going to change very quickly and there is going to be totally different kind of circumstances. Third, VCs. Is there any kind of engagement regarding venture capitalism in this country?
Yes, Farrukh sir, thank you. All three very important questions. So venture capital is an area which one would have thought that it could have been really incentivized under this year's budget. Hasn't happened. I would not blame the finance ministry for it. There's very little room to really offer those kinds of tax credits or preferential tax treatment, which many of the leading venture capitalists would like to see in a country like Pakistan before they come back. Of course, those local venture capitals, there is a local venture capital base as well, which is sort of limited. Ideally, you would like to see foreign currency denominated base coming to Pakistan. But I'm sure in better times, once, of course, we transition from economic stability to growth, IMF will give us that space to offer room to venture capitalists as well. SECP is working very actively on this. I think on the global economy, I was, in fact, very encouraged to see Finance Minister increasingly citing Uran Pakistan. Uh, Usually, Ministry of Finance is very conservative about what comes from Ministry of Planning. Usually, what is being given in those 5-year or 10-year perspective plans is regarded as a wish list by the Ministry of Finance, but not this time. So Uran Pakistan essentially mentions those pillars of knowledge economy and global economic changes which Pakistan needs to embrace. And Finance Minister cited Uran Pakistan at least 5 to 7 times that I heard of, even when he was announcing the budget for Ministry of Science and Technology, Ministry of Information Technology, and others as well. I think your last point, your earliest point on data being the new oil, despite of what others say about the data regime in Pakistan, I regard our data regime as fairly credible. In case of our economic statistics, for example, we follow the UN stat system, which is very much verifiable. Organizations like World Bank validate our economic statistics.
Right. Thank you very much,
That's
Dr.
very
Vaqar.
encouraging.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much for your insight. That's all that we have right now for the transmission. We'll take a short break for the headlines and be right back.